In this video, I'll be showing you how I transformed this oversized romper into a trendy New York Fashion Week inspired outfit. Now I know what you're thinking, New York Fashion Week was a literal week ago, and a week in the fashion industry is equivalent to a decade. So if this isn't about fashion trends for 2029, then who cares? And while you're not wrong, I still wanted to make a piece that captures the fashion trends that we'll be seeing this fall-winter season into spring 2020. One of the primary design elements I wanted my piece to have is this plunging neckline that I've seen in a lot of runway pieces. I also wanted to incorporate some gold tones and shimmer since what's defined as high shine is going to be a big trend this season. And if I can, I want to incorporate a cape or a cape-like element. For my piece, I'll be using this romper. It's pretty large, so it has a lot of fabric that I can work with. The fabric has the gold tones and shimmer that I'm going for. Also, the micropleats mimic the texture in a lot of the runway pieces I showed, evoking this kind of wispy linearity. And yes, I did just double check to make sure linearity is a word. After seam ripping the pieces apart, I draped them on my mannequin so I could play around with them and get a rough idea of the design that I was going for. To shape the bodice, I pinned out the center front and side seam to my measurements, as well as drew out a deeper neckline. These are actually the back panels to the original romper. I'm using them because they're smaller, and I'm going to save the larger front panels for a different idea I have. Once I flipped the bodice around to see how the design was coming along, I realized I still needed to make the neckline deeper. And after some more adjustments, that looks a lot better. Once I had an outline established, I turned the pieces inside out and sewed the new shape of the bodice. I wanted the romper to have a pretty exposed back, so I decided that thin rectangular pieces would work best for this. To make these pieces, I cut excess fabric from the bodice and trimmed them into thin rectangles. Then I assembled the full top by sewing the back pieces to the bodice pieces at the side seam, and then sewing the full bodice pieces together at the center front. Now onto the shorts. I started by removing the lining and then marking the new waistline on the wrong side of the outer fabric. Now for the design I had in mind, I wanted the bottom of the romper to be flowy and to drape with a lot of volume and movement. So I decided I would gather the fabric at the waistline rather than just take in the shorts at the side seam. To do this, I sewed a straight stitch along the waistline. Then, using the bobbin thread, I gently, and not so gently, bunched and gathered the fabric along. Now the shorts weren't finished just yet. Remember this fabric? I needed to make the shorts lining match the measurements of the outer layer. Because I'm not gathering the lining, I simply marked out where these fit me and then took them in at the side seam. And yes, I did only figure out that I didn't want to gather the lining fabric with the outer fabric after previously doing it while I was rushing. The bottoms ended up looking like a gown worn by Marie Antoinette, specifically the one in the portrait on her wiki page. Not really a look that was trending at New York Fashion Week. Finally, I sewed the completed bottoms to the bodice. Now if you're still watching, I bet you thought we were almost finished, but we're still not finished. I still wanted to add more detailing to the waist and had something like this in mind, basically 3 bands going around the waist. I later found out this is called a triple banded waist or simply a triple waist, and was oddly disappointed that there wasn't a more obscure technical term for this. Okay, getting back on track. To make these bands, I needed strips of this sparkly sheer fabric. Luckily, I had an extra sheet of this fabric from when I used it in my DIY balloon sleeve blouse video. From this, I cut out 1 1/4 inch strips. To give them support, I lined each band with a lightweight, semi-sheer interfacing. Then I used a loop turner to turn each strip into a thin tube that I would sew across the waistline. Now, aside from the 3 years I spent gathering fabric, this was the most tedious part of making the romper. I had to carefully sew along each edge of the bands, and I had to do this for 3 long bands in the front and 6 short bands in the back. For the closure, I sewed an invisible zipper into the back of the romper. And at some point I did make straps for the back out of fabric scraps that were laying around. Finally, we are at the last step, which is to incorporate the large front panels from the original romper. Because capes were featured at New York Fashion Week, I wanted to incorporate a cape element, so here I'm draping some variations. Now this one looks really interesting, and although I like it, it ended up being super uncomfortable when I tried it on. So I ended up going with a simple design where each cape piece is draped on the shoulder. But to add some versatility, I hand sewed a hook eye closure onto the cape pieces so that I can wear it in different ways. Alright, let's see how I did. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider liking and subscribing so that this channel might eventually achieve partner status.